Welcome back, everyone, to a brand new explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely futuristic scientific and technological development. We are looking at exactly how researcher Lázaro López Paz is taking the highly advanced theoretical physics of Dr. Jack Sarfati and fusing them into a tangible, real-world engineering roadmap. We're talking about merging quantum metamaterials with effective gravity to build something that, well, it sounds like pure science fiction, but it's actually grounded in rigorous step-by-step material science. So here's a wild thought for you. Is it actually possible to simulate a black hole's gravity right on a laboratory desk? Normally, when we think of gravity, we picture massive cosmic bodies, right? Planets, stars, black holes. But what if the exact same mathematical geometry that bends space and time out in the cosmos could be recreated using quantum optical platforms right here on Earth? That is the ambitious goal we're unpacking today, literally bringing cosmic phenomena down to a highly controlled tabletop scale. Okay. Let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Quantum gravity and metamaterials. 2. The power of BiIG crystals. 3. The 3 experimental key projects. 4. Analog spacetime simulators. And 5. The budget, applications, and where this goes in the future. All right, let's jump straight into part 1, quantum gravity and metamaterials. Now, you might be wondering, how do we even begin to connect the quantum world with gravitational effects inside a piece of lab material? Well, it all comes down to a concept that is absolutely central to Jack Sarfati's theoretical framework. It's called ODLRO, or off-diagonal long-range order. Think of it kind of like a massive synchronized swimming team. When a material achieves ODLRO, billions of microscopic magnetic particles, which we call magnons, stop buzzing around randomly and actually start moving perfectly together as a single coherent quantum wave. And because they're in perfect lockstep, any fluctuations in their collective phase can non-locally couple with electromagnetic fields. So, to put it simply, by controlling this giant quantum wave, scientists can theoretically alter the path that light takes through the material. They're effectively bending optical space, just like intense gravity bends physical space. Which brings us to part 2, the power of BiIG crystals. So, the math checks out on paper, but to actually pull this off, you need a very specific, almost magical canvas to work with. Enter BYIG. That stands for bismuth-doped yttrium iron garnet. This crystal has 4 crucial properties that make it the ultimate platform for this. First, it has ultra-low Gilbert damping. That's just a fancy way of saying energy doesn't dissipate quickly, so magnetic waves can travel for millimeters without dying out. Second, macroscopic magnon propagation. Third, high magneto-optic activity, thanks to that bismuth doping, making it super responsive to light. But the fourth point, this is the real game changer: room temperature Bose-Einstein condensation. Normally, to get that ODLRO quantum state we just talked about, you have to freeze materials down to near absolute zero. But BYIG can achieve this state at room temperature using electromagnetic parametric pumping. That means you don't need a multi-million-dollar cryogenic facility for this. You can literally do it on a desktop. Moving right along to part 3, 3 experimental key projects. Knowing that BYG is the perfect material, Lázaro López Paz laid out a highly pragmatic, structured experimental program to turn Sarfati's equations into reality. And look at how logical this progression is. Step 1 focuses entirely on the foundation, generating that room temperature condensate in the BYG film and verifying the ODLRO state using advanced light scattering. Once you have a stable condensate, you move to step 2. Here you integrate an ultra-precise optical system, a Fabry-Perot cavity, to physically measure the light bending. This proves the analog gravity metric is real. Finally, step 3 scales the whole shebang up to generate analog gravitomagnetic fields, simulating cosmic frame dragging. This final step is where we start pushing into advanced propulsion concepts. It just builds layer by layer. But of course, the physical world is messy, right? Step 1 requires measuring incredibly faint signals using Brillouin light scattering, or BLS. And when you're trying to measure the subtle quantum signatures of gravity, noise is your absolute worst enemy. Thankfully, López Paz's plan rigorously tackles these physical limitations head-on. Thermal noise, canceled out using time-resolved techniques. Laser intensity noise, stabilized with electro-optic modulators. Even mechanical vibrations from the room itself are handled by active vibratory isolation tables. They are making sure they get the highest possible signal-to-noise ratio right out of the gate. And once you mitigate that noise in step 1, step 2 demands an extreme level of precision. That Fabry-Paro cavity we mentioned, the one measuring the optical geodesic shifts, it needs a finesse value greater than 1,000. That means an unimaginably sharp, perfectly tuned optical resonance. This level of contrast allows researchers to detect phase sensitivities as tiny as 10 to the -4 radians. Just to put that into perspective, that is a shift in light so unfathomably small, it requires a sub-nanometer feedback loop just to keep the experiment stable. Okay, part 4, analog spacetime simulators. Let's zoom back out for a second. You've got this stabilized crystal. You are precisely modulating its magnetic permeability over time through a process called Floquet engineering. What does this actually mean in practice? Well, it essentially transforms the crystal into a tabletop cosmos. By modulating that permeability, the material emulates a relativistic Gordon metric. It acts as a programmable mathematical sandbox for gravity. Scientists could simulate the analog Unruh effect, generating thermal excitations that mimic an acceleration of 10 to the 24th Gs. They could even create artificial event horizons, where the magnon wave speed mimics the escape velocity of a black hole. And they can explore all of this dynamically, safely, and entirely on a lab desk. Finally, part 5, budget, applications, and the future. At this point, it is super easy to get completely lost in the astrophysics of it all. But Lázaro López Paz's roadmap brings this right back down to immediate reality. Because before we even get to tabletop black holes, mastering this technology unlocks massive commercial applications for us today. This research directly paves the way for magnetic sensors operating at the absolute quantum limit. It leads to ultra-low power spintronics, which is huge, meaning we could compute without relying on moving electrical charges, drastically cutting heat and energy use. On top of that, these setups can act as coherent transducers, which are vital for building the next generation of hybrid quantum computers. And this brilliantly illustrates the most surprising part of the whole proposal. You'd think simulating black hole physics requires a massive, multi-billion-dollar supercollider, right? Actually, scratch that. The entire 3-year open science budget is estimated at just $340,000 US. Let me break that down. The largest chunk is $115,000 to update the optical and BLS spectrometer equipment. Personnel is $90,000. RF instrumentation is $70,000. And those specialized bi-YIG films, just $45,000. Because it relies on room temperature materials and analog simulation, this is an unbelievably cost-effective way to push the absolute boundaries of quantum physics. All of this spans across a very specific 5-year chronological roadmap. Year 1 is dedicated to fabricating the crystal and stabilizing that initial Bose-Einstein condensate. Year 2 brings the high-finesse cavity online to map out the effective refractive index. And then years 3 through 5 are all about scaling up the power, analyzing those analog fields, and developing the advanced prototypes. It is a clear, methodical march toward a massive technological leap. Which leaves us with this final thought to ponder. If Lázaro López Paz and Dr. Jack Sarfati are right about this, we aren't just observing the cosmos from afar anymore. We're literally engineering its most profound mechanisms on a laboratory desk. So what new frontiers in advanced propulsion, in zero-heat quantum computing, and in our fundamental understanding of space-time itself are we going to unlock once these tabletop simulators are finally switched on? It's an absolutely fascinating question, and for sure, a technological roadmap we'll be keeping a very close eye on. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep learning.